So I forgot to record as I was getting all the B-roll and stuff ready. So the first shot of the video is gonna be me doing this hike-a-bike up this big hill, because I didn't expect that there were gonna be so many people doing boot camps in the park where I wanted to film. So this is the first shot you get, because we're gonna do something different today. Oi! Just want to take a picture. It did take me a very long time to get this shot. Hello, everyone. I came out here to Balboa Park. We are actually in the Morley Field side of Balboa Park, and this is the place that was clear enough for me to actually do some recording without interrupting anything. I didn't realize that people were going to be doing boot camp still. It is 11:04 on January 25th. I'm in San Diego. It's actually the first really nice sunny day. I think everyone's taking advantage of the fact that it's nice and sunny and coming out, so I decided to do the same. It's going to be a talking video again, because I have not figured out how I want to talk about the lighting in obsolescence, so I'm not going. Instead, I'm going to talk about the concept of presets. And yeah, I didn't think I'd have this much to say about presets, but I definitely do. I started writing the script for this video, and it just kept going, and it kept going, and it kept going, and eventually I just decided to leave my house and record this, because if I didn't, then I would just have way too much stuff to say about presets. And yeah, so this video is going to go places, and I hope that you'll follow me for the ride. I don't mind if you don't. Again, this is a talking video, so this is just going to be a lot of waxing on about creativity and presets and the role of ritual in creative practice. It's going to talk about labor conditions in creative work and why labor should be valued and how we should value that labor. I'm going to define presets. A preset is a particular set of parameters on a synthesizer that is used to recall those parameters quickly and easily. A preset is a way to utilize the same interface, right? The same playing interface, which is either a keyboard or your computer or whatever, a MIDI device, something like that. A preset is a way to take the same playing interface, replace the sound or the timbre of what's coming out of that playing interface, and then use the same playing interface to play this new sound, right? So you didn't have to do any work to learn the new preset. That's what makes presets so useful, is that you don't have to do any work to learn the new preset. You just have to hit a button and the new preset is recalled. I don't like using presets. I've realized that. I didn't know why I didn't like using presets. I thought it was just a weird personal preference that I had. There's a reason that people deride people who use presets, right? I don't know if it's totally legitimate, but I think that there is something there. The reason why people don't like people who use presets is because it's essentially subscribing to the intended use of a particular synthesizer that the manufacturer wants you to use a synthesizer for. That's fine if you just want to use it in that way, but all of the most creative things, all of the music that you listen to now is musicians taking particular instruments. Let's take the 808. Everything that you've heard from the 808 is a musician taking that instrument and taking its intended use and throwing it out the window. The 808 bass drum doesn't really sound like a bass drum. It doesn't sound like a kick drum. So let's just throw that tail out a whole bunch and make it really loud and use that as our bass line as well, or placing patterns in a way that no human could ever play. The Roland drum machines in the beginning were meant to be stand-ins for people so that you could practice or perform without having a drummer present. The Roland instruments, they are not that, right? They were not used for that in the end, right? When you made techno, they were programming patterns that no human could actually play. So the idea of subscribing to a synth manufacturer's prescribed intended usage is honestly kind of antithetical to the entire idea of creative practice. So kind of coming back to it then, presets are something that I've never really used, even with the M8, right? I don't actually store instruments very often. When I create my supersaw for trance music, I don't have a supersaw that I've stored as an instrument. I actually go through the process of hitting all the buttons, right? Navigating to the instrument screen, hitting A and up, or I guess it's edit, but I'm gonna call it A because I'm from Game Boy land. Hit A, hold A, hit up, go up to saw comb on the oscillator, and then hold A, hit left to go back to saw swarm, bring down the color setting to about 20, bring up the chorus to about CO, the reverb to about BO, set the filter type to a low pass, and then bring the cutoff down to about 6 or 7F. Bring the resonance up to about BO, maybe AO if you're not feeling as spicy. Then go into the envelope screen, hold select and go up. And then in the envelope screen, envelope to affect the cutoff, set the amount to about 4F, bring down the decay to about 4.0, and then change your volume settings on the envelope so that you can bring down the decay and the note actually will turn off after a set amount of time, right? So this is me describing, like, from memory how I create that sound, right? It's a basic sound, it's not super interesting, but I do that every single time I boot up the M8 and decide to make a new song. And, you know, why do I do that? That's a weird thing to do, I think. I don't know if it's that weird, but it's weird. It feels weird to me. And so when I was thinking about why I do this, I kind of got into the idea of ritual. It is a ritual that I perform every time I boot up the M8, make a new song, and work on it. I want to talk about the difference between a ritual and a habit, right? A ritual and a habit, they sound the same, but they're actually pretty different. A habit, it's a action that is done every day or every certain period of time as a result of repetition, and that repetition is mindless. You do that action over and over and over again so that when it comes time to do it, it requires less brain power to perform that action the next time. So when you develop a habit, you're saving time by making it require less brain processing to handle. Say you want to have a habit of brushing your teeth every day, which I hope you do. Brushing your teeth is something that you don't want to remember to do. It's just something that you need to build into your daily routine, and to do that, you need to make it a habit. So when you're teaching a kid that they should brush their teeth, you just have them brush their teeth every single day over and over and over again so that they don't have to remember to do it, right? It is saving them time. That's the point of a habit. It is a mindless repetition of a thing so that when you have to perform the thing again, you don't have to spend brain power to remember to do it. So that's a habit. A ritual, future me, if I'm being saucy and basic, is going to put the Merriam-Webster definition of a ritual onto the screen right now. So a ritual, if we're looking at ritual as a noun, a ritual is the established form for a ceremony. Ceremonial things are meant to be seen, they're meant to be thought about, they're meant to be events that everyone contemplates and thinks about. And so when we talk about ritual is not mindless, it is actually mindful. So I was thinking a lot about why I do this, right? Why I create the same instrument over and over again in an almost ritualistic way. I like to think of it as a ritual, right? It is something that is mindful to me because in the process of reciting, all of that stuff to you by memory, I could have changed any one of those parameters just based on how I was feeling that day. And that leads me to different creative paths that will actually kind of change the song's trajectory in very interesting and different ways. But more importantly, it's something that is done to take what is a seemingly mundane action and finding the meaning within that mundane action. I like to think of music making in a ritual way as opposed to a habitual way, because music making should be mindful. It should be something that you pay attention to. And so the actions that you do when you are making music also should be ritualistic, right? They should have meaning. And when you perform them over and over again, it's not so much that you should do it the same way every single time over and over again, you do it the same way, but you think about the ways that it could be different or the same. That's the point of a ritual. And I think that fits music making really well. So I think ritual is about taking what seems mundane, and it can be anything from opening up your program, cleaning your desk, right, getting everything ready to go. It's about taking that mundane action and finding the meaning within that action. What does opening Ableton or turning on the MA or turning on whatever drum machine or groove box that you're about to, what does that mean as you turn it on? And it can mean something different for different times you do it, but when you do that action, when you perform that action, you establish some sort of meaning with that action that you will then use to inform the other creative things that you're going to do then. Ritual takes an increased importance for the music that I like to make because repetition is actually really important in my music. And it's important in a lot of different musical genres. You think about techno, and it sounds like the same thing happening over and over and over again, right? So why would anyone be interested in that? Well, techno, it's not about the same thing happening over and over again. You talk to any techno fan and they would tell you that you were being dumb for thinking about techno in that way. A lot of techno is about slowly changing something over a period of time. It's about bringing listeners into a flow of a particular pattern, right? Whether it's a drum pattern, a synth pattern, or whatever, and then changing that slowly over time to almost increase the importance of what is happening there. And that almost has a ceremonial slant to it, right? It feels like something that is happening that means more than it should, right? Because at the end of the day, all a person is doing with live techno is just changing a filter cutoff. Or all they're doing in the studio is just changing a filter cutoff. But that filter cutoff means a lot more than just twisting a knob. So the framework of ritual means a lot to me, and it works really well for the kinds of music that I like to perform and make. When I think about the role of ritual in a genre of music, it feels dumb not to also integrate it into my creative practice. That's why I deliberately choose to recreate an instrument over and over and over again, because that is part of the ritual of making music for me. Part of what makes ritual special is the idea of craft. What craft is the actual labor that you're doing to create a particular object or create a particular piece or work or something. So the reason why craft is important, not just for ritual, but also for my creative practice, is I'm a dad now. My kid was born a little less than 2 years ago. He's a big responsibility, and when we were preparing to have a kid, we did all of the typical logistical stuff of like, oh yeah, make sure that we have all the stuff we need, make sure we, have the car seat installed, make sure that our schedules allow us to take care of him, take the correct parental leave that we can get off, all this stuff, switch off between parents, whatever. But what we also did, and what I didn't expect, was we spent a lot of time preparing ourselves to be creative. We spent a lot of time thinking about and training ourselves to be creative people, so that when someone new came into our lives and changed the way that we had to structure our time, we didn't have to change the way that we were creative too much. We wanted to maintain our creative tendencies and make sure that was something that we did because it's just really important to us. So what I focused a lot on is the idea of ritualizing my creativity, right? Not just turning it into a habit. A lot of people will tell you, just turn on your device or open Ableton or whatever and do that, every day for 15 minutes, even if you don't do anything. And on the one hand, that seems like it would help, but I don't want my music making to become a habit. I want it to become a ritual, because it is meaning making. It is important. It's something that I should be thinking about. And it wasn't super effective for me to just turn on my devices for oh man. I'm going to be honest, I don't really know how that happened, but it looks like we're still recording, so that's cool. I have about 20 minutes left, so we'll see what we can get through here. Okay, so that kind of habit making wasn't super effective for me when it came to making music, because I didn't want my music making to be a habit. I wanted it to be a ritual. I wanted to think about it. I wanted to make it a very active part of my creative process. When we talk about craft, then, I feel like what helped me in terms of ritualizing my creative practice was turning art making into crafting. To me, crafting means actually sitting into the labor of doing your creative work and thinking about what that labor is and why that labor is. Like, sure, all art takes a little bit of work, right? Craft takes work too. But why would you want to think about the ways that the two are related? Well, for one, when thinking about craft and kind of thinking about ritual as a whole, I like to reference a paper by Kara Stone. This paper is about reparative game design, and it talks about Kara Stone's game called Ritual of the Moon. And this paper has been super, super foundational in the way I think about my craft and art and creative practice, because the paper talks about what craft means and why craft is important. When we think about craft and how craft relates to art is made of craft, right? But a lot of the times we don't really think about what that craft is. Craft used to mean something. I mean, it still does mean something, but a lot of the ways that we have kind of changed the thinking about craft has been to devalue it and to really kind of downplay the role of craft in a particular work or in a particular practice. And I think that is not great. One, because craft has historically been related to women's work, right? The craft of textiles, the craft of pottery, all of these things, right? A lot of devaluation has happened of women's crafts, and craft is more traditionally thought of as a woman's activity. So, there's that devaluation there, and it kind of goes all the way up into like film editing. All of these things that are really important now are just devalued by the way that we think of technology and how we think of technology as this magic solve for any kind of work that people need to do. So Kara Stone's paper talks about craft and why we've kind of devalued it, and also connects it to this idea of how we've devalued the mundane, and how the mundane is actually where healing is. The paper has a lot to say, and I'm going to do a bad job of summarizing it because I am outside reading all this on my phone. But one of the central parts of the paper talks about how you can heal. Healing from trauma and using art as a kind of reparative practice. A lot of people think that art is just like you make an artwork and it cures you of all of the trauma that you've had that went into making that art. You take a syringe and you put it into yourself and you suck out all the bad stuff that happens to you, and you put it into this art form, and suddenly you're healed and you don't need to think about it anymore. And of course that's not how that works, right? But how does it work? How does healing work, and how does reparative practice work? One of the central theses of the paper is about how reparative art practice and reparative game design and reparative anything usually happens over time with small, mundane actions. Reparative practice gives people tools by essentially bringing them into the trauma or bringing them into a space that they don't want to be, probing, kind of looking through it, thinking through the meanings of it, thinking through what it feels like. And then it gives them the space and the tools to come back out again, right? And doing this a little bit every day over the course of however long, that's how healing works, right? It's not just like a one and done process. It's not, I fixed the problem and it's gone. Healing is a process. It takes time, and usually it's something that happens through mundane actions that you perform to process the way that you're feeling. So when we think about the ways that art practice works, right, and we think about the ways that craft works, craft seems important as part of a reparative art practice, because you're not just doing something for the sake of doing it. You're doing something to kind of change the relationship of your mind and your body to each other. And when you change that relationship, it allows you to process the different aspects of yourself that allow you to heal from things, or allows you to think about things differently, allows you to change the way that you actually relate to yourself. If we want to bring it back to synthesizers and presets and all of that stuff, when we think about craft, one of the big strengths of crafting, and one of the things that craft does, is allowing people to kind of get outside of their head and more into the world, kind of redefining a relationship between the mind and the body that isn't so much like, oh, I am exerting my will on this piece of material and it will turn into what I want it to because I am exerting my mind's will on it, right? Crafting is about taking that idea and changing it more into integrating your body and your mind together. Instead of imposing your will on a piece of work or a piece of material or whatever, it is about utilizing your senses, utilizing your body to think of that piece of work or material differently. And so when we go into synthesizers, and hardware synthesizers in particular, if you want to be reductive about it, you can just do all of this stuff on a digital audio workstation, and you can do it easier, and you have more power to do it, right? So why do we bother with all of this? Why do we care about the way that the buttons are laid out, and the way that we navigate the screens, and the way that each instrument is conceived? The reason we do that is because we, as people who are into hardware synthesizers, want to reorient the way that our mind relates to sound. And to do that, we use knobs and buttons and faders and all of these apparatuses. That's kind of why, to me, hardware synthesizers are important, is because they take what it can easily be a technological replacement for craft and turns it back into craft. And by turning the act of music making into craft, it allows us to think about music making, and it allows us to approach music making in a totally different way that will often unlock different avenues or paths or trajectories for our creative practice. So that's why I think craft is important for synthesizers in particular, because otherwise, hardware synthesizers are pointless. Like, why bother, right? I think that a lot of music and a lot of genres and a lot of artists are already aware of this. They are already aware of the benefits of taking your practice out of your mind and putting it into your body, and allowing your body to experience things and dictate things and do things to inform whatever artwork you're making and inform the end product. Because, you think about something in your mind and you can only get so far, right? There's always going to be that abstract distance between the mind and the body, and then the finished creative work that exists. So why not synthesize? Oh God, why not integrate it all and have it all be a part of a creative process, as opposed to dictating your will onto a digital audio workstation and having a fully formed piece of music come to life immediately. So hopefully that was a relatively clear explanation of how craft relates to ritual and why that is important. When we think about turning art into craft, or think about the way that craft relates to art, when I say it means sitting into the labor of doing the creative work and actually thinking about it, it's not just important for the ways that craft relates to art and craft relates to creativity and ritual. I also think that it's really important because, if you look at the state of labor in creative work, it's not great. No one actually knows what kind of labor goes into creative work. There's like a myriad of reasons why. We don't have any unions in a lot of creative work. A lot of, professions where craft and labor happen, right, and are extremely important to the end product of a creative work, just do not have any unions in them. So they don't have any way to advocate for the importance of their own labor and the importance of their own craft. Another thing that's happening is the consolidation of companies that's kind of taking a lot of labor and a lot of craft that a particular company would do. If that company is bought by another bigger company, then that labor to the bystander essentially becomes invisible. Now it's just like magic, right? It's not the work of a particular company and that company being made up of particular people that are really good at that particular type of work. It's just the magic of a giant company is capable of producing that work. There's a lot of cost cutting happening with creative work too. And by cost cutting, I mean just making people work harder for less money. There's all sorts of reasons that we can talk about for why people don't understand how labor relates to creative work. It's one thing to point out all of the different ways that the labor itself is devalued in creativity, but I think that one of the things that we need to do is to actually imagine a future in which this labor is valued. To me, a world in which labor and craft is valued is a world in which craft is respected for its own sake, right? And we give craftspeople respect, and not just respect, but the time and space needed to actually do the craft well. It's one where craft for its own sake is respected, and art practice for its own sake is respected. This is going to be directly a shot at AI stuff, but there's just so many different ways that we're thinking about to kind of take the idea of craft and take it out of the hands of craftspeople. All this talk about utilizing these magic bullet solutions of like ChatGPT and Lensa and stuff like that, where, oh, look, the artist doesn't need to do the work of art anymore. They don't need to put pen to paper. They don't need to put paintbrush to canvas. They can just type in a prompt or use this AI and it will generate the thing that they want them to. That's cool, but I think it's missing the point because, you know, that the pen to the paper, the paintbrush to the canvas, for synthesizers, the pressing of the buttons, that is the point. That is the art. The end result isn't the art. It's the process that you take to get there. That is what the art is. I think that valuing craft and in a world in which we value craft is a world in which we understand that the craft is the art. We take the actions that people do to create art and we treat them as valid and interesting and you know, something that is not just necessary, but it's something that is really good to do. It's not just for us, right? It's not just for the recipients of the work. If we want to imagine a world in which craft is valued, I think we need to imagine a world in which craft and work and labor doesn't slowly kill the people doing it, right? And so I think craft is a very good framework for thinking about this. We just went over the ways that craft can be reparative, and craft can actually help people doing it. If we think about craft as an action or work or labor that can actually aid the person doing the labor, that can actually help them process and heal and think about things differently, then that seems to me like a very intuitive way to approach thinking about a world in which work doesn't kill the people doing the work. If you think about labor in terms of crafting and craft work, then I think that it opens a window into a way that we can kind of conceive of a future where labor and work and crafts are respected and valued, and it doesn't kill us to do the work. I think I'm running out of battery now. I'm actually running out of battery now, so I'm going to finish this off somewhere else. I got to get lunch, though. All right. I'm now just realizing that that this thing is in a synchronized frame rate with the camera so that it looks kind of weird and crazy. That's okay. I'll just leave it like that and probably change the frame rate some other time so that you can see it actually. In the meantime, I'm just going to finish this off. We have moved away from the park. I ran out of room on my recording and I had to come home and export the stuff, so we are in the backyard. It is really nice. There's a bit of a breeze, so if there's too much wind noise, that's my bad. But yeah, we'll just finish this off. So to kind of sum up what we were going over, Ritual and craft are kind of two sides of the same coin. I think craft is important for ritual because craft reshapes your mind's relationship with your body, and ritual reshapes your body's relationship with its environment. So both kind of complement each other in really interesting ways. And when we start taking this back out to ostensibly the original topic of the video, which was why I don't use presets, we've gone pretty far away from from that, but I promise it's all related. We're wrapping this up. We'll get there, don't worry. Then when we kind of take ritual and talk about its role in creative practice, I feel like ritual and creative practice, to me, have increasingly become the same thing. I think that it's important to kind of call that out because the way that I feel like a lot of music technology brands and a lot of music technology YouTubers and the way that people talk about music and synthesizers and stuff like that, it is very of the moment. A lot of the people talk about how this cool new tool can get you to where you want to go really quickly. And that's almost never the case. And again, I think Red Means Recording has been kind of going through it with a bunch of the videos that he's released recently, just talking about the relationship between music technology brands and YouTubers and the creative process. So with this, I kind of want to reinforce that and then start thinking about ways that we can reframe our relationship with our environments, because when we talk about ritual and creative practice and why it's important for art and creativity to be part of our lives, I think that what we went over with how craft and ritual can be reparative and how closely ritual and creative practice are related, I think that when we reframe it in this way, then it becomes more valuable to just people in general, right? We're taking art away from a work of a singular person that is a genius or something. We take it away from this kind of simplistic and outmoded idea of art being an imposition of one's will onto some sort of medium, and start bringing it back into creativity and art as a community practice, right? So it's not just you, it's your community. And then two, we bring it into the everyday, into the mundane, something that we do every day, and we receive little judgment for doing it every day, and it just becomes a part of our lives in a way that allows everyone's creativity to kind of flow free and be something that everyone does. Because a lot of the ways that I hear people talking about creativity and art is, oh, I wish I was creative, or oh, I wish I was an artist, or something like that. And one of the things that I try to emphasize with my creative practice is that everyone is already creative, everyone is already an artist. It's not the kind of thing that you become or you are not. It's something that everyone can just turn on and off. And the problem with the way that people think about art and creativity is that the ways that our society has rewarded creativity have gotten smaller and smaller over the last however many decades. So that's kind of why people don't think of themselves as creative people or artists or whatever. Because when people see that society rewards them less for exerting their creativity in different ways, then ultimately people start getting discouraged when they do something that they think is creative and it doesn't get seen or doesn't get noticed or whatever. Everyone is mundanely creative all the time. Think of the different little ways that you optimize your workspace, or you perform a task in a specific way, or this whole thing of life hacks, right? You perform a task in an interesting way that allows people to do things quicker or differently or whatever. People have been doing and coming up with these ideas all the time forever. It's just that the only mechanism for which we can reward such creativity is through capitalism and the market. And this is something that was written about in a paper by... I'm going to come up with a pronunciation. There was a work that he did about the ways that we fail to harness the creativity of the common person and how we only allow the market to reward creativity. By reframing creativity and art in the mundane and in the everyday and of everyone, I think we can get a little bit closer to that imagined world of art being valued, labor being valued. And again, that's important because we need to come up with futures, imagined futures that aren't, super depressing, that aren't just we work until we die and then that's the whole of it. Ultimately, I think framing ritual as creative practice and creative practice as ritual goes at least some way into thinking about the ways that we can incorporate art and creativity into our daily lives. And I'm not trying to say this in some kind of like woo-woo, like way too spiritual about it, because ultimately I like to think in terms of practical and material results. I think that it is ultimately a part of this project in which we come up with ways for art and creative work to heal us, to help us, to fulfill us in ways that we haven't been able to be fulfilled in just our like daily lives of, working through capitalism and doing work and then having to do creative work on the side. So as a part of this project of a reparative art practice, framing creative work as ritual and thinking about the ways that you create your own rituals in your creative practice is really important. So I hope that I can kind of bring it back to why I don't make presets and why I don't usually use presets. When it comes to me making presets and why, or me not making presets, it started as just something that I never did, right? It was just a kind of unconscious creative decision, but I never interrogated it. And now that I have kind of thought through this whole thing and where I am in my life and why I have never really been a fan of presets, it's come down to I like to make instruments over and over and over again because I think of it in terms of like being a crafts person. I am crafting an instrument over and over again. And that craft is a part of a ritual that I perform whenever I want to make a new track or work on some sound design or any kind of audio work that I do in my life. And so rituals are important in my life because they help ground my creative practice in something that is broader than just making this for myself and my own ego. I want to feel like it's in service of something bigger than myself. And I do think that most people have this conception of why they do art, right? It would never just be for yourself, but sometimes in the process of getting from I do this for myself to I do this for something bigger than myself, we kind of lose perspective of what that is, right? What is bigger than myself? I didn't have a great answer before, but I think I'm getting a little bit closer with at least this video and me kind of talking for what feels like hours about all of this and making this script and everything. This whole thing started off as just a weird question about why I don't use presets, and it turned into this weird rumination on what creativity means and creative practice is. So hopefully this isn't too esoteric for most people. Hopefully you get something out of this. And yeah, that's going to do it for this video. I'm hopefully going to release a new track soon, so we'll get back into actual music stuff relatively soon. I'm going to do my obligatory please like, share, and subscribe. Hopefully my neighbors can't hear that because I don't want them to think that they live next to a YouTuber. And yeah, that'll do it for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.